Hey everyone, it's Sen Types, joined by Uncommon Fossil. We are the Reasonably Effective Podcast, episode
17.
17? 17. Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, we're going strong, getting more views and all that listens. So that's really nice. I hope you're all enjoying it as well. And today we're going to talk about something. I'd say it's different. I don't really know. We're going to be talking about, of course, Pokemon TCG Live and actually the expanded format in it because you've been playing some of that, right?
Yeah, I've been doing a decent amount of expanded with a few different decks, and it's fun because it is, as we'll get into it, a different expanded format from the traditional because live it's a beta within the beta expanded.
Yeah, the format's called. If you look in casual, it's called there's standard format and then there's expanded beta. So that's something. So you think the first thing we should talk about is the cards that I don't know. What do you think we should talk about first
Well,
here?
just what expansions people have access to with expanded, right? I mean, so traditional expanded starts with black and white is the oldest set. Black and white XY, Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet. But then within the live expanded beta, you don't have access to the earliest cards. It starts with Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet. So you lose almost half the cards. So you're losing a number of staple cards, right? And part of what I think is interesting is you can't find decks because there's no competitions, as far as I know, that have been held in this, right? IRL events were the full expanded format, and you can't actually run an online event within Live because you can't make friend requests at this point in expanded.
Yeah, and also like no one's really playing IR like honestly like no one's playing IRL expanded right now because like it's honestly hard to get cards for and like IRL's like it's doing okay, but mostly it's very focused on standard right now.
Yeah, I mean, Pokemon, when it came back post COVID, I don't believe there's been an official expanded event yet, also. So I don't know if Pokemon cares about expanded, but players like it. It is fun to do.
Yeah, players like just something else. And expands like has for a long time been the secondary format. I guess it
Yeah.
still is because it's like the only other kind of format in live. But it's just we said it only has Sun and Moon on. So in terms of attackers, this doesn't actually affect it too much because there's the idea of power creep where like
Yeah.
the newer attackers are stronger. Specifically, the tag team GXs are really powerful.
Hmm.
And expanded as well as VMAX and V Stars. Those are like the dominant Pokemon. And of course, you still have all of those. I don't know about new EXs, but I don't think they're awful. But then we're losing a lot of staple like trainer cards and like utility-based Pokemon as well. So that's like the big loss, I think, right?
Right. Yeah. Particularly amongst the trainers, there are definitely a few Pokemon, but the trainers, a lot of staple cards we're losing. So, I mean, one of the cards that we're losing that I actually kind of like the format. It's a little more interesting, but one of the cards that I miss is Versus Seeker, which, if you're familiar with it, is a tremendous card. I'm trying to call up the text here. I have it in a deck. I apologize for.
You have it in a deck. What are you looking at?
I'm in live because I'll just if you can see the cards in live. You go to expanded, but it won't show up these older cards. But then you can hit, I think, show all for cards for formats, and it
Okay.
will. So
Yeah, I'm seeing
so
it.
so versus seeker. Sorry, I wanted to read the text. It's an item, so you can play multiple per turn. You put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. A really strong item. It allows decks to play fewer supporters and a greater variety of supporters because then you play four versus seeker. You can get back the supporter you want when you need it.
Yeah, it's like really good. And then it also synergizes well with one of the other really powerful cards in expanded, possibly the best, that being Battle Compressor, which is an item that says you search
Hmm.
your deck for three cards and discard them, or up to three cards, allowing you to get supporters for Versus Seeker. But then it also allows you to do other various powerful things from the discard pile. Um, Honestly, a lot of expand decks are based around the discard pile
Yeah.
because of Battle Compressor, and so while other decks are like playable, they're not anywhere near as like strong.
Yeah, I mean, with myself, with the time I started, with Mad Party being a new deck, then Mad Party expanded decks. Obviously, think Battle Compressor. You just toss 3 Mad Party cards into the discard, or toss a supporter, toss a research there, and then you can grab it with Versus Seeker. It was super powerful. I kind of glad that Battle Compressor's not around because I kind of think it's a bit overpowered myself. But
Yeah,
it's
definitely. I think
super
a lot of
powerful.
people. Yeah, and it also synergizes well with execute for propagation, um,
Yeah.
which essentially just says if it's in your discard pile, you put it back into your hand. You can do this as often as you like during your turn. So that's really fun and powerful. Again, possibly overpowered because it allows you to have no downside from cards like Quick Ball and even sometimes Ultra Ball if you have 2 executes. Um, and as I said, synergy with Battle Compressor. And so I think those are like, to me, those are the main ones, as well as the A specs. Those being
Yeah.
Computer Search and Dowsing Machine.
Yeah, they're the
Uh,
main two.
and actually, if you look at another live, I believe they show. Yeah, they show up under Pokemon, right?
Yes, they're under Pokemon. I have it called up here. So hopefully by the time, eventually I think we'll be able to play these in live. And hopefully it is a trainer. But yeah, I mean, Computer Search, if you're not familiar with it, reading it, discard 2 cards from hand. You can't, and then you search your deck for any one card you want, put it into your deck. So the ability to search for any one card, obviously tremendous. Now with ace specs, you can only put 1 ace spec in total in your deck, kind of like Radiant Pokemon. So you have to choose which ace spec you play that one. Only 1 copy of it, and no others. But obviously some very strong cards.
Yeah, I'd argue though that Computer Search and Dowsing Machine, while they're good cards, they don't really make any decks. So the fact that they're not in the format doesn't change it too much.
Yeah.
However, Life Do, a tool card that says it, which actually interestingly gets hurt very much by the fact that tool cards are no longer item cards. But it says if the Pokemon's attached to is KO'd, that your opponent takes 1 less prize. This is like super broken in some decks, but that one does change the format. And I guess I'll talk about some of the other control cards.
Oh, wait, hang on a second. I'm cutting you off, but because I was typing it in to call it up. So Life Do is actually under trainers, not Pokemon. So I just, anyway, it's just bizarre.
Okay, well that's interesting.
Yeah.
But then some of the other control cards are super like insane. I guess the main one I have here is going to be Bunnelby with its ability or its attack to recover to recover any card, I believe, or also to mill. It's a very good card. And then also there are like defensively based cards like Silent Lab.
Hang on a second. So just on the Bunnelby, this is the Omega Barrage card. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's one with yeah.
So it can attack twice also, right?
Yeah.
So besides that, it's right, kind of crazy. Go on.
Yeah. But then cards like Silent Lab and Garbodor, as well as Vileplume. These are all like a lock-based Pokemon. Vileplume's item lock, Garbodor's ability lock, and so is Silent Lab. We do see, and as well as Wobbuffet, we do see locks in some forms, but it's definitely weaker in live expand, which makes the format much more enjoyable, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, even with PTCG, where you could play the full expanded, it could be unpleasant. There were a lot of lock decks, which once at that they could set up pretty well because of all these cards, and then also a lot of dark decks, which partly that was just a way to kind of mine the ladder too, which it wasn't fun to go against.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of like cards we're losing specifically?
Yeah, a couple. There's the one energy Double Dragon, which is a very powerful card and hurts a number of decks. 2 dragon. If it's attached, can only be attached to a dragon Pokemon. It provides 2 energy and any 2 types of energy. Also, not it can be 2 different energies at the same time too. So with a card like ADP, which is still in format, one Double Dragon, and you can do the V-Star, the GX attack. I apologize. Yep. Yeah. So a couple. I'll just briefly. N, which is a very strong supporter. That it's coming back with a very similar card, but right now.
Yeah,
Iona, right? So, but at the moment, that's not around. A good comeback card, right? Which is nice about it. Which is I think people will be glad to get Iona. Each player shuffles his or her hand into their deck, and then you draw a card for each prize card remaining. So a way to help come back. and just mention Ranger, right? Because I mentioned ADP.
Yeah.
So Ranger, which let me get the text right here. Remove all effects of attacks on each player and his or her Pokemon. So it's basically if your opponent ADP uses the GX attack, which is called what again?
Alter Creation.
Alter Creation. Yep, thank you. Alter Creation. They take an extra prize for the rest of the game, plus do extra damage. All you do is play Ranger the next turn. It removes those effects, so your opponent just wasted a turn, right? So it made ADP much worse. Any card, it was a one-card tech to beat that. So, but you don't have Ranger, so that certainly affects things. And then Muscle Band as a tool card. Just it would be played a lot if it was around today. I think the attacks of the Pokemon this as cards attached to do 20 more damage. So it's 20 more damage, which we have a 10 more, but obviously getting that up to 20, very nice. And there's no limitations on it. It's not situational at all, which the 30 ones are.
Yeah. And then a few more cards I think I just want to run down real quick. In terms of like powerful, like consistency cards, Colvis. A very powerful draw supporter, Trainer's Mail, very fast way to get through a deck, although we do still have cards like Acrobike. And then also Skyfield, a very powerful stadium card that has to do with colorist, so it doesn't matter too much, but increasing bench size. This is particularly good with I don't know. It's a very good card, though. It certainly has value. I'd say Reggie's. A lot of the things, though, that need it like are hurt because of loss of Battle Compressor. But then Special Charge, allowing you to recover special energy, is quite good. Then we also see Teammates, a very powerful comeback-based card, I suppose. And we don't really have anything. Raihan's kind of similar. Wally, allowing you to evolve immediately turn 1, which is kind of good. But again, I don't think it has tools anyway. Max Elixir, another very fast card for like turbo-based decks. We'll talk about one deck that I don't actually know which decks we're going to be talking about. But there's one deck that would like to play it, but it has a replacement. And then Fighting Fury Belt, increasing your HP of a basic by 40, and then you do 10 more damage. It's quite powerful. Again, we have seen kind of similar cards though, so it's not a huge deal. But you know, there are a lot of like very powerful cards that we are losing. As I said, they're mostly just trainers though.
Right. I mean, in a sense, Teammates is kind of a better card than Raihan in a number of situations.
It depends what type of your deck you're playing.
No, it does for sure. And Max Elixir, in a sense, is like Electric Generator. Only does one, but it's for any type of energy. So it kind of is a card that opens up Electric Generator for any deck, in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. But I'd say, like the main deck that played Electric Generator, or sorry, that played Max Elixir was there are two decks that we'll talk about. The one's Turbo Dark. Which it does hurt. I don't even know if we have this. We have a list of decks. It's not directly on here, but then also like lightning-based decks. And we see that those now have Electric Generator, which is perfectly fine, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously it gets two, so it's better. It just is type restricted.
And you see one less card.
Okay, yes, that is true. So, do we want to talk about some of the cards that you can play in Expanded and Live that are kind of staple cards? Because there are a number of cards that you want to put into a lot of decks.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go off with the first one, that being, and I have an expanded deck open if you're a visual, like a watcher of the podcast. So Dedenne GX, in my opinion, is like one of the best cards ever.
Yeah.
That's a bold claim, but there are better cards, but they're kind of banned in weird circumstances. But Dedenne GX, which ability, you can only use one of this ability per turn, but it says discard your hand and draw 6 cards. It's an on-play ability. Very powerful. It can just bail you out of any situation. It's very easy to get down as well, and it's quite good. It can be a liability in certain times, certain circumstances, but overall, it's just like absolutely insane, and in my opinion, the like best card in the format. Or I guess I'll talk about another good card that's not in standard, that being Quick Ball, allowing you to discard a Pokemon from a card from your hand to search for a basic Pokemon. And then I'll talk about the third piece of this, Crobat V, that says draw until you have 6. You can't use multiple Crobats per turn, but it's solid. It doesn't draw as much as Dedenne, but you do keep your resources. So together, the three of them are like, in my opinion, the backbone of Expanded Live.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Crobat, with paired with the Dene can be tremendous to see a lot of cards. You can sequence it either way, depending how your deck's working. And quick ball,
Well, you
obviously,
can't play Dedenne and then play Crobat after if you have Crobat in your hand.
not in your
So you
hand,
discard.
right? But you're seeing 6 cards. Depending on the deck, there's a good chance you get a quick ball or something. You can get the Crobat
Yes,
still.
yes.
Yes, I mean, yeah. I mean, it depends sequencing what you want to do, right? Can you afford discarding a lot of cards that you don't know about before playing Crobat? But in quick ball, obviously, just rotated. Everybody's used to that. And then there's a number of cards like the Dene and such that have on-play abilities, so getting it into hand in a lot of cases is better than what Nest Ball does putting onto the deck. I mean, on the bench.
Yeah, definitely. And then there are also, I'd say, the main attackers that we'll get to these later, but tag teams are like really good because
Yes.
they just do like absurd amounts of damage and are very easy to power up. Aside from that, like most of the other stuff isn't too impactful, except for I'd say, of course, if you like have been playing for a few months now, you'll know pre-rotation. So various recovery cards are like nice, and Aurora Energy or Rainbow Energy are nice.
Mm-hmm.
But then also I think very powerfully is going to be a card like Welder, allowing you to accelerate energy, Fire Energy, making fire, and we'll talk about this probably during this podcast or maybe during next podcast because there is a lot to go over. A fire type is definitely one of the best cards in this format or types in this format.
Right. I mean, just you have Welder, you have Giant Hearth, you have Fiery Flint, Fire Crystal, Heat Factory, Welder. It's just it's tremendous, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a big deal. One of the cards I want to put out there too is Guzma, right? Which in a sense is a boss substitute, but you switch your opponent's Pokemon and then you switch your Pokemon also on from your bench to the active. And for a lot of decks, Guzma is better than boss depending on how your deck operates. So it's nice having the option boss or Guzma, more flexibility there.
Yeah, that's cool. It's better with versus Seeker though, definitely because you could
Yes.
play one Boss Swords and one Guzma, and one card that I guess we didn't talk about. I guess I skipped over. It was Float Stone that we're losing, giving all
Yeah.
your Pokemon free retreat. We still have Air Balloon, which is quite solid, and a Skateboard as well, which is fine. And there are a number of cards, but Float Stone is really the best. So, Guzma's not as good without Float Stone, definitely.
Yeah. There's decks definitely with some of these expanded decks. We have to find the substitutes for things. Not having Floatstone hurts. I will put out another a skateboard, which we hadn't talked about, but that is it reduces by 1, but it allows you to retreat if you're asleep or paralyzed. So with the Jirachi, it is an engine option that's nice, an option there that you can retreat for 1 less. Which there's obviously a lot of cards that do that, but this is the only way to retreat, I believe, if you're asleep or paralyzed.
Um,
Maybe.
yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's some other way, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Okay.
It's certainly a solid card. It's to do with Jirachi from Team Up, so which I don't know if we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an option. I mean, you do have Scoop Up Net, which obviously
Yeah.
just rotated, and that can obviously get any single prize Pokemon, or even it can get the new EX cards too. Correct? I believe.
Yeah, it can. So that's theoretically quite good. The basics don't have absurd amounts of HP, but the stage twos like do have a lot. But then you can just share all them as well. So yeah, it is like what it is.
I mean, you could like ride on EX Scoop Up Net when it's damaged, right? I mean, I'm not saying you want to, but you could do that.
You could. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of value in like scooping it up, but it's certainly an option.
Yeah, but that's a card obviously that's very very useful. I also would say Field Blower. That's a expanded staple, which is if you're not familiar with it, you choose 2 in combination that you want between Stadium and Tool cards and discard them up to 2. So you can get a Stadium and a Tool. You can get 2 tools and discard them. So very good, really better than anything in format now.
Yeah, obviously it's comparable to Lost Vacuum, but it's better. And then let's see, there's one other card here I have. That's that you are a big fan of, right? Lily's Pokédoll.
I do like that. That is fun. If it's a item that acts as a 30 HP Pokemon. You play it from your hand, which in live you drag it off to the side like you would a regular trainer, and then it
Yeah,
goes on.
that's how it worked in PTCG as well.
It did, but for people that haven't played it, right, just letting them know
Yeah.
that. Because I remember the first time at PTCG I had a Pokédoll and I was pushing it onto the bench and it wasn't going, and I like didn't know how to play it that game. So
Yeah, I've seen YouTubers do that too.
so it's just and then it's a 30 HP Pokemon, and if it is in, well, if it's knocked out, the opponent doesn't take any prizes, so that's nice. It's a little wall in that regard. It's easy to knock out, but they don't get any prizes. But then also, if it's in the active, right, you may put it back into your deck.
That's on if it's on the bench.
Is that?
Do you have it pulled up? I can pull it
I
up.
do. No, if this Pokemon is in your active, you may discard all cards from it and put it in the bottom of your deck. So, because I was playing with with a Zacian deck, I played Luke Metal, which played Zacian and Doll. One of the options is you could retreat the Zacian to the bench with whatever you had, promote the Pokédoll back into the deck. So it added a switch card. It also makes a deck infinite too, is a way to do that.
Okay, yeah, I didn't never play this deck that much, or that deck that much.
Yeah, that. And I thought when you're
You
talking
go ahead.
when you talk about cards I like, I thought you were going to bring up Acrobite because that's another trainer that I really like. When we talk about decks, I always want to include it and usually say no, leave it out. But you look at the top two cards of your deck, put one of them in your hand, discard the other. I think it's similar to Trekking Shoes. I think generally a little better on average, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's a good card. Again, it's not one of those cards that adds a ton to the format, but I think it's a cool card. It's a turbo based card as well. So if you're a fan of Donk, you'll like that. But Donk's not very good in this format, but it's not unplayable either. I've yet to try it. I might try it, but we'll see.
Right, you have nets, you have goons. What it does, though, is you get through your deck faster, and obviously that's one of the things with Expanded. You just have you set up faster, start doing whatever it is, controlling or taking knockouts quicker, right? So all these little things add up to a big difference, hopefully.
Yeah, but I think it's time we start talking about specific decks because
Let me just the one cards we didn't say, which are there are the rescue cards that are good, right? Rescue Stretcher. And in like Ordinary Rod that
yeah.
are useful cards too.
Although keep in mind, some of you may or may not know this, but Super Rod, which is similar to Ordinary Rod, essentially the same thing, will be coming in the next set, or will be coming soon for us. I don't know exactly when, but we can look forward to having that back in format. I think to me that's the #1 card that I'm missing, like an Ordinary Rod, Super Rod type card.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rescue Stretch is really good, and so is Ordinary Rod. But yeah, I think it's time to talk about our first deck. So, you want to lead us off here?
Sure. And why don't we talk about welder-based decks, which was something I liked a lot. So we had obviously welder, which let me read the text on that, which I'm blank. You look at I'm not finding it here at the moment, but welder.
I got it.
Okay.
Attach up to 2 fire energy cards from your hand to one of your Pokemon. It can be your active, can be your bench. Does not have to be a fire Pokemon. And if you do, you draw 3 cards. This is kind of like Gardenia's Vigor or Melanie. You need to attach an energy, so you can't draw without attaching. It's a very good card, though.
Right. You have to have energy in hand. And we'll talk about there's some very good cards to get energy in hand, right? It works better than Gardenia's Vigor, partly because the Pokemon are better, I think, than the grass we have in Standard now. But also, drawing 3 helps. And you can attach to the active, right? Which all those things help. So it was really a nice way to set things up. You need to get energy in hand. Like you said, you have to have 2 to start in hand. So you had Giant Hearth, a terrific stadium. You discard a card from hand, and then you search your deck for up to 2 fire energy. So if you have Giant Hearth, then boom, you're guaranteed your 2 energy that way. You also had Fiery Flint. That's an older one. You can
It's not that much older. I know it rotated before you played, but it's not. It's like
when I was playing Welder Box, it was not legal, right? It was that cutoff, right, of rotation.
Yeah.
But it might have been just slightly older. But when you play this card, you discard 2 cards from hand and search your deck for up to 4 fire energies. So get a bunch of energies, and you thin your deck a lot with it, which obviously is good. And then Fire Crystal, which is a terrific...
Oh, sorry, one thing I want to say about Fiery Flint. some of you may think that 4 energy is like absurd. That's like overkill. But it's not actually that bad. You definitely could use it. We'll talk about one Pokemon specifically that loves as much energy in hand as possible. I'm assuming you're going to talk about that card. And then also you're accelerating 2 with Welder, and then you're attaching a third, so you're using most of it anyway. So even if you're not using that specific Pokemon, like the list I have here doesn't play that Pokemon, which we'll talk about in a second. It's still like very solid.
Yeah, it is good. Fire Crystal, without these things cycle around it, you put 3 fire energies from the discard into your hand, so you don't have to discard anything. If you're already and if you were with Giant Hearth or Fiery Flint, you could discard fire energies, and then you could just get them back into your hand with Fire Crystal. So a lot of things there. Oh, and then Heat Factory. Oh, which is Prism Stars, which you didn't mention before either, I don't think, right? So
Yes.
So Prism Stars. You can only have 1 Prism Star in your deck of a uniquely named Prism Star, correct?
Yeah, you can only have 1 of each Prism Star, but you can have like multiple different Prism Stars.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so I could have this case. I'm talking about Heat Factory Prism Star. You could have a different Prism Star also if you wanted to. But the other unique thing is when it's discarded from play, it goes in the loss zone. So that's out there too. So Heat Factory is another fire stadium. Once during your turn, each player may discard a fire energy. If they do, they draw 3 cards. So another useful engine for fire decks. And then the other thing with this stadium, and I get with any of the Prism Star stadiums, right? Whenever a player plays an item or supporter card from the hand, it prevents effects of that card done to the stadium. So you can't bump it with Field Blower or any trainer card, right? The only not a trainer. Bump it with another stadium, so an item supporter couldn't bump it.
And Chaotic Swell will also bump this,
right?
If you play it on top, I believe.
Yeah, well, and that is a stadium, right? So that would
yes.
So any stadium, so you really had to play another stadium to bump it. An attack, I guess, like Lugia would bump it also.
Yeah, and so will Pokemon like Marshadow and Pumpkaboo.
Yes.
So it's definitely gonna get bumped. Because those see play, I think. Actually, okay. I guess we should talk about the elephant in the room now. The fact that Expanded is obviously only playable on lives like Beta Ladder.
Yes.
A lot of people just play like starter decks on it, or just like bad decks, really bad decks. And some people play solid decks, but the ladder is not super good, so it's really hard. Like when there's no like meta, it's very strange. Like we are some of the first people to talk about the meta, the format. Some other people have certainly talked about it as well, but keep in mind that if you play games on the ladder, you might not see any of these decks. You could literally see, like, you could just run to starter decks 5 times in a row.
Yeah, I mean, besides not being able to do friends matchups, which means you can't play with your friends or do an event, you also it's not ranked, so which means which people don't want to play it as much, and then you just don't know who you'll see. So there are legitimate expanded decks we see, which is good, but at times people that like the previous starter decks will then play them in expanded because that's where that starter deck is still legal.
And by the way, don't do that. That's bad. You're gonna run into me playing like Control, and then you're gonna like cry the rest of the day.
Right, or I'll play my Welder Box deck, and you're just wiped out within a couple turns. So it's right. Honestly, if just play the current starter decks in standard, they're solid if that's what you want to do. But obviously play the decks you want, but just expanded decks are better than standard decks, so don't expect things to go well with you if you're just playing a standard deck and expanded. I would say.
Yeah, although they're not that bad. Like you can certainly win. A standard deck can beat an expanded deck because, as we said, the card pool is smaller. So the expanded live card pool is smaller than the actual expanded card pool.
Right. And
the decks aren't like drastically better or anything.
No, right. The damage output by the new Pokemon, the HP, is better for the most part. And if you certainly play a deck like Mew, Genesect, obviously. You're not missing many pieces, right? A few things you change, but it's pretty solid anyway. So there's exceptions. But with this Welder box, getting back, so we have the Arcanine EX, and that's kind of like Reshiram and Charizard GX. So Reshiram, so 270 HP, and it's got 3 super attacks. What you would want to do is if you go second, you can use your Welder, hopefully you have these tools to get energies in hand. So if you get 3 energy on it, you do Double Blaze GX, you do 200 damage turn 1. So boom, you're taking ideally multiple prizes, right? Or at least one prize, if not multiple prizes. And then the next turn, you attach a 4th energy because you're probably not getting knocked out at 270, especially that early in the game. Then you do 230 damage. Then you can't do Flare Strike again the next turn. But then you have Outrage. So if they haven't knocked you out, then you do 30 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on it. So similar to Arcanine EX, but a Pokemon that you don't have to evolve. And with Welder, you could potentially start doing the big attack turn 1 in the game. So that was kind of the way you started with just a smash that often would just wreck your opponent's day. And then you had some other attackers in the deck, depending. And then the other card, which you're alluding to, I think is Blacephalon Baby Blounds, which is an Ultra Beast, which is another set of cards that.
Yeah, we're gonna talk. Oh yeah, we're gonna. We'll have them on our list at the very least.
Right. So there's other Ultra Beasts too within it, and some cards. There were trainers to work with Ultra Beasts and such, all that. But then it had you did Fireball Circus. Was the main attack. The second attack, for 3 energy, you discard any number of fire energies from your hand, and it does 50 damage for each card you discarded this way. So you could have a lot of energies in these Welder decks, and we have all these cards to draw energy and to recover energy. So especially late in the game, you would just do this massive attack where you just discard, get a whole bunch of energies in hand, and you can basically one-shot whatever your opponent has to kind of close out the game often. So it was a powerful... very powerful deck. With a Welder deck, it was a bit high roll, right? Because you needed to get Welder in hand and set up early, or else you were in trouble. But if you got it going, your opponent was in trouble.
Yeah, and then there's a third attacker, right? That's like one of the main attackers, like Cramorant V, right? And you played that deck, right? There was in standard format, it was Reshazard, Baby Blounds,
and Cramorant V, right. What kind of was nicknamed Tempozar because it would kind of start attacking and just kind of keep attacking with Spit Shot.
Although it didn't actually it wasn't actually that consistent. I don't really know why it was called that.
Yeah, because Welder-based decks, while they were high roll decks, when they paid off, tremendous, but when they didn't, you were just doing nothing, right? Because then you're attacking with Blacephalon's first attack, which I didn't mention it because you don't want to think about it. It does 10 damage. You turn one of your face down prizes face up, and you do 50 more damage. So 60. You're not getting.
If it's a fire energy, which you wouldn't know anyway, probably.
Right. So you're probably doing 10. Even if you do 60, unless that's the magic number, it's not good, right? Cramorant is an interesting card in that it hit the bench with Spit Shot, discard all energy for 3 colorless energy, so it would be fire in this case, because that's all you have. You discard all energy from it, and it does 160 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, so you can hit the bench with it, which was a number. And remember back we mentioned Dedenne GX, the HP on that happens to be 160. And every deck basically played the Dedenne GX, right? A few didn't, but basically that was one of the most common cards around. So you kind of
still do, right? In live expanded.
Yeah, I mean it's if you like you play research in a deck, you play Dedenne GX, right? Unless there's some real reason not to. So you had the ability to one shot a Dedenne GX whenever you felt like it in the game. So very powerful.
Unless they had bench barrier, which isn't uncommon, and we see multiple Pokemon with that.
Yes.
But then, one thing I should talk about also is the terminology. We've probably been referring to some of these Pokemon by their abbreviated names.
Yeah.
For example, obviously Cramorant's Cramorant V here, which I think we said. But then, did we say Reshazard, which is Reshiram and Charizard Tag Team GX?
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's just called Zard, although that's probably silly because there are lots of Charizards. And then Blounds is Blacephalon, because it's such a BL and it's like a clown. And speaking of that, I'll talk about another Pokemon with a funny nickname, that being Meat Dog or Heatran GX. So that's an interesting Pokemon. I'd say the 4th piece of that deck if you chose to play another attacker. With its ability Burning Road, it's a GX, but it says when you move it from the bench to the active, you may move any of your fire energy from your other Pokemon to it. Kind of like a mixture of Armarouge and Hisuian Arcanine V.
Hmm.
But then or no, more like weirder V. But anyways, it's a GX attack here. Hot Burn GX. For each fire energy attached to it, you do 50 damage. Of course, you can get lots of fire energy on. The idea is that you hit for big damage during the late game. It's very good.
Yeah.
It's not as like powerful as a Reshizard necessarily, but it can be more powerful. It certainly saw play. And is worth running.
Hmm.
And then I'll also talk about. Do you have anything else to add about Heatran?
No, I mean, well, I mean, I tried it. That was a card that was in and out of the deck from my standpoint.
Yeah. And then another one I guess should deserves mention, although it's not necessarily part of the Firebox. Should we just go through all the Pokemon in the Firebox deck?
If you
Probably.
want to. I mean, we don't have much more, right?
Yeah. Well, there's
Well,
there are a few. There are a few.
what do you want? You want to talk about Jirachi or?
No, no, well, I'm talking about the attackers. I
Okay.
don't feel like we need to talk about Jirachi. I don't think Jirachi. Okay, yeah, fine. We're talking about Jirachi. Um, so Jirachi,
Well,
just
Jirachi
walk us
was
through the
the,
Jirachi
kind of
experience.
like the Celebrations of Mew is the engine in decks. Jirachi was the engine in Welder decks. And when I played it, Escape board, right, had was that right? Escape board had already
Yeah, that's
rotated, so you had to have Scoop Up Net. But back before when Escape
or switch.
Right, but with a skateboard, you could attach the tool, and you had that pivot with Jirachi for the rest of the game, which was nice. And so Stellar Wish, which is better, I think, than some of the later cards. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon's the active, you may look at the top 5 cards, reveal a trainer. So not just a supporter or an item, but any trainer. Put it into your hand, shuffle your deck, and the Pokemon is now asleep. So it was a nice draw, better to me than the Celebrations Mew or the Jirachi that came later.
Yeah, and even debatably better than Comfy from Lost Origin, the Lost Zone one. They're
Mhm.
different types of cards, but it's quite good.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, tell me the experience, right?
Oh, with Jirachi, yeah, because like I said, the skateboard wasn't there, so I honestly, you're playing 4 Jirachis and a bunch of switches and scoop up nets, and I would get the Jirachi in the active, and then I would look at my cards and I'd get a scoop up net, and then I'd scoop it up, and I had to send up my next Jirachi, and I'd like get a switch card, and I switch back to the other Jirachi, and I'd go through like 3 or 4 Jirachis, and I wouldn't have actually got like the welder or something I needed. I just managed to switch Jirachis a bunch of times. So that was that's part of the Firebox welder box experience too. Uh, futility of trying to get that last missing piece at times too with it.
Yeah, and that's why I wouldn't recommend playing Jirachi in Expanded unless you want to play it with a skateboard, but then you probably don't play it with Scoop Up Net.
No.
It has like oomph, but it's also kind of like stupid. You get these like silly turns where you just burn all these resources and don't get anywhere. So yeah, that's why I just played Dedenne and Crobat and like things like that. Actually, this list doesn't play. Oh no, it does play Crobat. Oh, and you do have Radiant Greninja as well. I guess we'll talk about Radiance. The two good Radiant Pokemon are unsurprisingly Radiant Greninja, a solid draw option. And which discards an energy card from your hand to draw 2 more cards.
Hmm.
And then also Radiant Charizard here, a
Yeah.
fire type attacker that's pretty good. Does 250. And if you have 2 or less, if your opponent has 2 or less prize cards remaining, it essentially attacks for only 1 fire energy. And then yeah, but some of the other attackers, I'll talk about. Well, I think we need to talk about Mewtwo and Mew, but there's one other
Yeah.
basic fire attacker that doesn't need Mewtwo and Mew. Second in the World Championships 2019, Blacephalon GX or Big Blounds or just Blounds.
Hmm.
Although if you call it just Blounds, it gets very confusing. But its attack here, Mind Blown. For 2 fire, put any amount of fire energy attached to your Pokemon into the Lost Zone. It does 50 per. Also, its GX stack just takes a prize card essentially for 1 fire, which isn't bad. It's quite good. But Mind Blown allowing you to just discard lost on lots of fire energies. It's quite powerful. We did see this. It's an Ultra Beast, as we said. Blacephalon is. So you can use what's it called? Beast String, I believe,
Beast,
right?
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Which accelerates energy on your 3 or 4 prize turns. We might talk about that later. I'm not sure. But then, and can you swap by Ultra Beast in live? I don't remember if you can.
Oh, let me see. But for the Pokemon, I
Yeah.
think so. I'm scrolling down. So
Yeah,
under,
you can.
yes.
But anyway, so you go and you get like lots of fire energy in play. This is actually its own deck with Naganadel from something Celestial Storm, maybe I don't
Okay,
remember.
I'm not
The
sure.
Exorcist energy to itself. It's quite powerful, but you can put stuff on GX and fire-based decks as well. As an okay option. But then I think Mewtwo Mew. I think it's time we talk about that. Move on a little bit, but not completely, right? And
Yeah,
this is
that's
a card. Yeah, it's a very good one. And can be played welder. With its ability
right.
Perfection, it just can copy attacks of any GXs or EXs on your bench or discard pile. Keep in mind when it says EXs, it means capital EXs, and
Right.
some of them are quite good, but you can't play them in Lives Expanded. And notably, and there are a bunch I don't know which exactly are the best, but there
Right.
are a few that are quite solid. But
And
you
the
can use this.
new EXs will not work with this, right? As they're lowercase EXs, it's completely different. It's a bit confusing, but there it is.
Yeah. But then you can use this to copy stuff like Reshazard, Big Blounds, and then
Yeah.
quite a few others. But Mad Cargo GX is a solid fire attacker, as well as Charizard GX from I remember I think it was called Family Zard or something. Was that what it was called?
I don't remember about that one,
It was
but
something strange. I think it was Family Zard. So Mad Cargo GX. And then there are some other ones. There were Naganadel GX. Okay, so this is where
yeah.
we get into other types. So you can do Mewtwo Mew GX. You have Welder, and then you have Aurora Energy or Rainbow Energy to be able to use various types of attacks. So this is
Hmm.
where we see Naganadel GX as another snipe Pokemon, very similar to Cramorant V. Except it's just a GX. Oh, and Mewtwo you can copy Evolution GX, is like Charizard GX, Mega Cargo GX, Naganadel GX. But it can also copy tag teams, so it does that. Gengar Mimikyu GX, a good disruption tool, which we'll talk about later. Um, Muck or Muck in Alolan Muck GX. That's a lot of Muck, but it's like an attacker. Vileplume. I'm just gonna pull up a list of all the GXs, but Vileplume GX, a very solid um, Pokemon GX that allows you to like hit for solid damage. We also see, let's see, I'm gonna scroll through the list real quick, because there are some really good ones. There are Charizard and Breaks in GX, which is a solid one. There is Cobalion EX. There or GX. There is, um, I'm trying to see which ones like C play. Oh, there's a Dragonite GX, which hits for really high damage. And there's anything else Espeon and Deoxys GX, Giratina and Garchomp GX. I believe there's Incineroar GX that was a very solid like revenge attacker. You could be Jirachi GX prevents psychic weakness from being applied, so
Hmm.
that's nice. Um, well, obviously to remove Mewtwo Mew's psychic weaknesses as well as Urshifu VMAX's psychic weakness. There's Latios GX to wall off Pokemon, Lugia GX to loss zone Pokemon. Let's see anything else. Omega Lopunny and Jigglypuff GX to go ahead and just like counter various GX based decks, notably Pikarom, I think. Um, Magnetal and Guzzlord GX to take prizes with its GX attack. Noivern GX to item lock or special energy lock your opponent. You can even put in Pheromosa GX to donk. You could put in let's see, I think there's one more or two more. Um, is that about it, do you think?
I think that covers it pretty well.
Oh, you can do Altaria GX.
I mean, look, I think it's super flexible, and then what you pointed out briefly there, the fact that it can copy evolution GXs made it even better because you just had to get it in the discard pile. So therefore, you search it out, discard it. You don't have to try to evolve it and get into play. So even easier to get those. And you can also see how important Battle Compressor was, which obviously we don't have access to. But the idea that you could just in your first turn, just chuck three GXs in the discard pile in Mewtwo and Mew was all set with its attackers for the game.
Yeah. It's quite nice. I'm trying to see if there's any. There are obviously ones of other types as well. Those are mostly the
Yeah.
generic or fire type ones. Um, and then yeah, oh ADP as well. So should we talk about
Yeah.
ADP now? Yeah. Do you want to give us
Yeah.
explanation of that?
Sure. So ADP, which is one of
which is Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia.
yeah, right. Arceus, Dialga, Palkia, GX. Tag teams. Oh, so a tag team usually is 2 Pokemon. This one happens to be 3. It gave up 3 prizes, and I believe these were the first 3 prize Pokemon in the game. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think
At
so.
least generally. Maybe there was an exception, but so these were 3 prizers, and people got a lot of criticism probably for power creep, right? Because this is a basic Pokemon 280 HP, which was probably pretty absurd at the time.
I mean, still, 280 HP basic Pokemon, still insane.
It is. And then it's a GX attack. Oh, I don't know if we mentioned it, but with GX attacks, kind of like the V-Star powers, you can only do it once per game. So it has your GX marker. It gets turned over after you use your 1 GX attack. They're all attacks, I believe. None of them were abilities. And this Ultra Creation, which is tremendous.
Oh, but you can use both a GX attack and a V-Star power.
Yes, you can. And if you play an expanded, you'll see the markers on the side for both those things, GX and V-Star. And it's a nice option having both for sure. So Ultra Creation GX. So if you have a Metal Energy for the rest of the game, your Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active, which is fine, but nothing game-breaking. But then if you have at least 1 extra Water Energy attached, so Metal Water, when your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out from damage from attacks, you take 1 extra prize card. So that's tremendous, right? So you knock out a tag team, you're getting 4 prizes. Just a regular like GX 2 prize Dedenne, you get 3 prizes, take 2 Dedenne GXs, game over. And even a single prize deck, which the advantage of a single prize deck is you're only giving up 1 prize at a time, so you have time to set up and get going. You're taking 2 prizes at a time, 3 single prizers, game over. It really put a lot of pressure on your opponents.
Yeah, and that's the other attack. Your Ultimate Ray does 150 after you use Ultra Creation. It does 180, allowing you to one-shot Dedenne GX, Corette V, Tapu Lele GX, Elios V, Lumineon V, any of those setup Pokemon, which a lot of decks play, and may very well play 2. If you just one-shot 2 of those, as you said, you win. And then it all accelerates 3 basic energy and attaches them to your Pokemon any way you like. It's pretty absurd. Like, it gets overlooked a lot as like some like underwhelming effect of an attack, but it's completely insane. It's like Arceus V-Star's attack, except it's like better. It does less damage, although honestly it does the same amount of damage a lot of the time. But then it accelerates like 3 energy to any Pokemon. It's basic energy. It's pretty insane. It allows it to be paired with many various things, right?
Right. I mean, you're playing Metal and Water, so for this, so you probably want that. You could use Aurora Energy to pay it, or something like, or the Rainbow Energy to pay it. But obviously, you're accelerating basic energy, so you want to make sure you have those in deck. I mean, the Zacian was the most common thing because they were together after
Zacian V.
Zacian V, right? Because that came out after that was from Sword and Shield. Doing 230, which was on for a basic with Pokemon was a tremendous amount of damage at the time. It would do 260 if ADP was up, and then it allowed you to Metal Saucer, get those energies set up, and potentially you could use Ultra Creation on turn 1 if you went second, which then, if you were able to do that, your opponent was in a lot of trouble. They kind of...
You Metal Saucer, and then you either need to Energy Switch or Bronzong, which you can actually do turn 1 because of a Bronzor.
Yeah.
Turn 1 Ultra Creation into ADP's GX attack, into Zacian V's attack, which can one-shot like a tag team. It was not every tag team, but certain tag teams. And there are buffs to Zacian V all over the place as well, which is pretty absurd because we see Rusted Sword allowing Zacian to do 30 more damage, plus Leon, you can literally one-shot. Not everything, but pretty much everything.
Yeah, I mean, if ADP, you pull off Ultra Creation, and then you Ultimate Ray, which hopefully you get a knockout, but even if you don't, now you've accelerated your energy on your Zacian V or whatever your other attacker is, you're in a dominant position. So,
yeah. This is definitely, like, in my opinion, this is possibly the best deck in the game. You also have Zacian V-Star, allowing you played that deck, right?
Yes, I did put a Zacian V-Star. I can't find that deck here, but I know I had it. And yeah, it was very good with the V-Star. It kind of makes it tankier. Actually, I think I put this as the V Star in my Luke Metal deck. I think because it does drop the damage output, right? And with ADP, you just want to smash your opponent, make them cry, and go home, right? Like the ultimate schoolyard bully, right? And then
Yeah. You can use your attack for 4 energy, doing 310 damage.
that's true, right? And because, right, like you said, you can use your V Star attack also. It is a nice option in there. You'd play cards like Mawile GX, right? That would then put it put a Pokemon from the discard onto the bench, which you could attack with too.
No, hand onto the bench. Echoing Horn is discarded to the bench, which you would
Oh,
also
from their hand to the bench. That's right. So your opponent, right. So with Echoing Horn, you can be careful, keep your cards in hand and not in the discard pile. But back then, if it's in your hand, it's going down. Sorry, I'm going to take it out. You know, you don't want to play your Dedenne because you know that's a bad move. I'm going to get it on the bench and take it out. So
and you lose the ability to.
right, you lose the ability. You've given me 3 prizes, and you know it's just not good in a lot of ways. And like you said, at this point, Rusted Sword, I think I put that, and I think it just gets it going. You can also put in Forest Seal Stone if you want to use that to help set up, right? If you just don't want to use a V-Star attack, but you get 1 extra search card for it. It's very powerful. And there are a number of tag team cards too, like or GX cards too, like Cherish Ball to search for a GX, which could get you your Dedenne, your ADP, just useful cards back in the day that still are good.
Yeah, and then you can also use Origin Form Dialga V-Star with very powerful V-Star power that allows you just to take consecutive turns. Pretty insane. Keldeo GX is a relatively common partner as well. Walling GXs and DXs. There are some other partners as well. The Galarian Birds were like a thing. That was a deck, but it was okay. It's Suicune V as well as like a thing. And compare it with, which it was just they're all fine. But I personally I think like Zacian or Dialga is a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, it's hard to probably get away from that. Obviously, with Dialga V-Star, then you could take back-to-back turns and just gives you an additional threat there on top. So.
One other thing I should say is the very powerful Sky Seal Stone, which allows you to take an extra prize. You can literally KO KO a Mew VMAX for 5 prizes. Or they're technically 6, but not really. You can definitely KO a Mew VMAX for 5 prizes. With say Drapion V, one shot it for 0 energy for 5 prizes. Like that's just pretty absurd.
Yeah, you get some of those crazy combos. Now, obviously, it's very situational.
Well, just you're playing against Mew VMAX. Like if you're just playing against Mew VMAX, boom, you've like pretty much won the game. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to get off Ultra Creation and all in the Sky Steel Stone and stuff. But yes, it's very good. I mean, that's the danger in one sense to the old expanded, which the full expanded is those decks can be so powerful, right? It can make things difficult, especially for newer people. So the fact that things are a little less known, I think, is a plus right now.
Yeah. What deck do you think you want to? So I don't think we can talk about all the decks in this podcast, but we might talk about them next podcast. But
yeah, if
what else do you want to talk about?
to. So yeah, we brought up Dialga. Obviously, with taking V-Star with back-to-back turns, there's options with that. I've seen.
Are you gonna talk about the deck?
You can, but you asked
the Dialga deck.
You want to talk about Dialga? Go ahead.
Do you want to talk? Well, we both decided to build the Dialga deck with the Guillotine and Garchomp, right?
Yes.
So if you didn't know, there's an absolutely insane combo in Expanded. I actually covered this in one of my videos. You use Cyrus Prism Star, which is a Prism Star card. It's a supporter. It says you can only use this if your active Pokemon's water or metal. That's not that hard to do. Your opponent chooses 2 bench Pokemon and shuffles the others and all cards attached to them into their deck. Now there are 3 Pokemon in play. You go KO one of them with Origin Form Dialga V-Star. Take an extra turn, remove the other 2 with Guillotine and Garchomp's GX attack at GG end. However, Dialga V-Star attack requires 5 energy, 4 which are metal, and then Guillotine and Garchomp's GX attack requires 6 energy, 2 which are psychic, the other 4 being fighting. So yeah, the idea is you power it up with Electro GX and then move the energy with, in this case, Bronzong. Although in regular expand, it's what's the card called? Something switch.
Yeah, it was easier in the full expanded. Because here you had to get the stage 1 Bronzong evolved, but obviously that once it's set, you're in good shape.
Yeah, but then you can you just go ahead and you use Electro GX and like Branjong, and then you just like completely win. It's very awkward to use, but it's very powerful as well.
Yeah, I mean I would say it's a pretty high roll deck because Electro GX with its energy bomb ability, it can
A
attach
scramble switch, I remember the name.
a scram. Yes, right. Um, so with Electrode GX, you accelerate up to 5 energies from the discard pile to your Pokemon. I think any way you'd like. It can't attach to a GX or an EX, and this is the capital EXs, so that is not around. But you want to attack with your Dialga V-Star, so you move 5 energy from the discard onto your Dialga V-Star. Now you can do your Star Chronos attack, and then you can just attach one more, and then you just need to get one more energy in play to do the Garchomp and Giratina GX's GGN for the 6 energy. So very powerful cards, and cards like Electro GX, which they're not like top of mind for great cards, but obviously very powerful card for what it did. Now it knocks itself out. You're giving away 2 prizes, but to get 5 energies in play when you want, certainly powerful option.
Yeah, and you can also pair this with I've forgotten the name. Gardworn Sylveon, tag team
Mm-hmm.
GX, a very powerful tag team that essentially like it just removes your opponent's hand. So that's kind of obnoxious. Of course,
Yeah.
you are giving them like prizes, but it's a pretty solid card. Yeah, it's quite good. Um, but this deck's like super inconsistent and like impossible to fall off the combo. So I wouldn't say this is anywhere near as good in this format as it is in regular format.
No, it's more of a fun thing to play because when you pull it off, and you'll pull it off occasionally, it's a super good feeling. But you're gonna brick a lot of the time. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. And I think there's one last deck we should talk about today. And this is one of your favorites, in both standard and expanded, but that's the lightning decks, right?
Yeah, I love the lightning decks, like Miraidon, EX, Electric Generator, tremendous cards. I think so. Um, and now I guess you're talking about pairing with Pikarom probably,
Yeah.
which is actually, and that's a deck you played some, and I haven't really played that deck. But do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Pikachu and Zekroms attack full blitz. If it's ADP's attack, pretty much the first attack, the one that like does 150 accelerates energy. This is all lightning energy, accelerates all lightning energy. Then tag bolt 200 for 3. But then if he has, oh, I just realized, did we? We'll get to that. Attack bolt. If you have 3 more lightning energy on, it does 170 damage. But I realized, did we ever talk about Reshiram and Zekrom's big attack?
The GX attack for 200, or the big one with six.
What if you had 6 energy? It does.
I didn't
300.
because no, it did do right. Did do 300 for 6, but if playing the deck, it would be very rare that you do that.
But
Attack,
you
I
will
gotta
do
say.
this sometimes with Mewtwo and Mew based decks. That's definitely an option.
Yeah. With a regular welder deck, you probably weren't going to do that, but yeah, that's there too.
But anyway, so because all tag team GX attacks have a effect that says you can have more payment in some form
Mm-hmm.
to deal to have some additional effects. Some of which in ADP's case it's take extra prize for the rest of the game. Some of which are kind of bad, like 3 extra damage you do. 3 extra energy you do 100 more is not that good, but Pikarom here 170 snipes quite solid. You have cards like you were saying you like Miraidon EX. You also have which is a very solid attacker
Mm-hmm.
doing 220. Vikavolt V dealing 50 for 2 and sorry, not paralysis and item
Item
lock.
lock, yeah.
Very obnoxious. We also see the list can play the electric generator to accelerate energy as well as Tapu Koko Prism Star and
Yeah.
Thunder Mountain, which is not accelerate energy, but it does reduce the cost. So pretty much the same thing. And then you have you have Electros and Attacker, which is actually an evolution. You can play essentially as a basic for certain counters. And then we have Electro Power plus, I suppose, Electro Charger,
Mm-hmm.
increasing the amount of damage you do, which is pretty insane. If you played Power Tablet and UV Max, it's that. But for Lightning, very powerful. And you can also play Reggie like a VMAX to boost your damage again. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely think lightning is like a very strong type. Not as good as fire, I wouldn't say, but it's still quite good.
Yeah, a lot of pieces. A card like what, like Bolton, to accelerate energy if
Oh,
you
yeah,
want. There's a good number of pieces for sure. Yeah, lightning probably. I mean, fire has the most. Lightning, maybe a close second.
yeah. But I would say that, in my opinion, the best decks there are two, maybe control, but I haven't really explored that. But then the best deck is probably ADP, or and we'll talk about this next podcast, I think.
Mhm.
Shadow Rider Calyrex, with the psychic tag teams, which are very obnoxious and toxic, but very strong. But we'll get to that. But I'll leave this with actually one card that we haven't really talked about much.
Yep.
It could be played in some of the decks though that we talked about. That's Acerola. If you've played Sharon's Care, it's like that, except for any type. It's completely busted. Support card that says put
Yeah.
one of your Pokemon that has any damage counters on it, and all cards attached to it into your hand. Essentially allowing for healing of anything. It's pretty absurd, and it's like super busted, especially in Shadow Rider. But we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to end off with?
No, I think that was we covered a lot of ground here, and I think I'm
I don't know if we
happy.
covered that much ground.
Well, I imagine our listeners think we've been talking plenty long.
Yes, that doesn't mean we've covered a lot of ground.
Well, expanded is a lot to discuss. So, yeah. So you want to close this up?
Yeah. So I've of course been 10 types joined by Uncommon Fossil. Check us out on YouTube, as well as any other podcasting platform, including Spotify. Spotify is the one where we can like look at data, but of course you can watch us or listen to us on any other platform. But
Right.
YouTube, if you want to get in contact with us, youtube.com/at 10 types. What's yours? What's your like
At,
channel? Is it?
yeah, add Uncommon Fossil
Okay,
with
so
1M.
yes, Uncommon
So
Fossil with one M. So yeah, check us out. Yeah, of course, comment down below if you have any other ideas. But we appreciate everyone listening. We're coming up on 20 episodes soon. And who knows, very well soon. We may be the best Pokemon podcast. Not because we're good, but because the other ones aren't that good, unfortunately. I mean, there aren't very many, and they're all quite small. But I don't know which ones are still going. I know some have stopped, but we hope you've enjoyed. And as always, we're excited to see you next time.
take care.